Hello, welcome to the EPG Pathshala program in linguistics. I am Pramod Pandey, Professor, Center for Linguistics, Jawaharlal Nehru University. I am the principal investigator of this project. We are now going to listen to the discussion of a module from the course Introduction to Pragmatics and Discourse Analysis. The coordinators of the course are Professor Imtiaz Hasnan, Department of Linguistics, Aligarh Muslim University, and Professor Rajneesh Arora, English and Foreign Languages University, Lucknow campus. The title of the module is Intercultural Pragmatics, and the author of the module is Professor Sonal Kulkarni Joshi of Deccan College, Pune. Listen to the discussion.
Intercultural pragmatics has emerged in recent times as an important area of linguistic research. Its emergence and subsequent developments can be attributed to the tremendous changes that have taken place in the world over in the last few decades. Currently, the world is witnessing many socio-political and economical changes. The widely circulating term globalization effectively encapsulates the tremendous pace and extent of the changes capturing the world. Other terms like multicultural, intercultural, cross-cultural, diaspora, hybridity, and so on have gained currency as never before. This very amalgamation of socio-culturally and linguistically different people has given rise to peculiar communication situations. Many times it creates what is generally known as the problem of intercultural communication. When people from different cultures have to interact with one another, they find it very difficult and sometimes impossible to share ideas, feelings, and experiences with their interactional partners. This situation often gives rise to misunderstandings and misinterpretations and turns the interaction into a failure. It is also found that people manage to overcome this problem through the use of some universally acceptable communication strategies or through the use of global language like English. The exploration of such peculiarly intercultural situations and their study was supposed in the beginning to be related to the study of cultures involved. Naturally, it was the prerogative of the ethnographers to investigate such intercultural issues and pass judgments. Later on, however, with the emergence of sociolinguistics and which is an interdisciplinary branch of linguistics, intercultural communication became equally the concern of linguists as well. The branch of sociolinguistics that deals with issues related to intercultural communication is named as intercultural pragmatics. To understand the exact implications of this name, it is essential to first understand the two key terms, culture and pragmatics. And we'll discuss more about these two terms, that is culture and pragmatics, in this module. When we talk about culture, there are conventional notions of culture and empirical notions of culture. So first we'll look at the conventional notions of culture. As we know, it is a widespread convention to identify the notion of culture with nationality, ethnicity, faith, or sexuality. Culture, as it is generally understood, presupposes the membership of a group which is internally homogeneous. This internally homogeneous group may embrace any sphere of life. That is why we talk not only of Indian culture but of school culture, market culture, and even Bollywood culture. This makes culture a very complex notion. It is too pervasive to be a concrete reality. It is an imagined thing. People imagine and are imagined to be members of a group. Culture is also presented as an unchanging, static thing. We think and talk of Indian culture or Chinese culture as if it has remained the same since ancient times. On the contrary, we have empirical notion of culture. The traditional notion of culture is too essentialist to suit the objectives of empirical scientific research. The world cannot remain divided on the basis of culture any longer. Technology has enabled it to achieve such a state of connectedness that no culture can remain secluded and isolated, nor can it remain static. It is in a constant state of flux and a cross fertilization. Ease of immigration has enabled people to identify with more than one culture and to be multicultural at once. The practice of outsourcing jobs to other countries by foreign corporate companies has opened up another fertile field for international and intercultural contacts without even having to migrate. In the light of these developments, a researcher has to acquire a new perspective on cultural studies. In 1999, Halliday proposed a view of culture which is most suitable for empirical studies of culture. According to him, we can distinguish between two types of culture, that is, the big culture and the small culture. By big culture, he means the static, uniform culture which is equated with national or ethnic identity. And the small culture is related to the cohesive behavior in activities within any social grouping. Now we have company culture or family culture or youth culture, and all of these are example of the second type, that is the small culture. It is this second type of culture which should be the concern and area of research for a sociolinguist. The branch of linguistics which studies intercultural communication is pragmatics. Intercultural pragmatics is also recognized by the name of interactional sociolinguistics or intercultural discourse. Let's now consider some of its aspects which make it an effective tool for intercultural discourse analysis. We'll now discuss the relevance of pragmatics for the analysis of intercultural communication. As mentioned earlier, pragmatics is a study of the contextual use of language. It evolved mainly as a result of the changing perspective on language in the later half of the 20th century. Around 1970, the Chomskyan structuralist belief that language is a self-contained system and can be described in its own terms was found to be inadequate. From being an abstract system of grammatical rules, language came to be regarded as an interaction, an utterance, a speech act, a social act or discourse which serves a definite function in the social context like greeting, persuading or commanding. The functional and pragmatic theories of language emphasize the importance of the context of communication. We'll now discuss more on this contextualization and contextualization cues. Once a specific example of intercommunal or intercultural interaction is chosen for analysis, its linguistic and interactive features should be contextualized. The researcher should be committed to studying language, culture, and communication in context. The activities selected should be interpreted in the context for the participants involved, the situation, and the topic of conversation. Contextualization cues are those aspects of our communication that relate what we say to the context. They signal how we expect what we say to be interpreted. Signaling mechanisms such as intonation, speech rhythms, and choice among lexical, phonetic, and syntactic options are features of language providing cues to contextualization. They do not change the basic meaning of the message, but they certainly affect its expressive quality. Again, contextualization Contextualizing cues may have a number of linguistic realizations. The code, dialect, and style switching processes, prosodic phenomena, as well as choice among lexical and syntactic options, formulaic expressions, conversational openings, closings, and sequencing strategies can all have similar contextualizing functions. Unlike words, however, these cues have to be interpreted in context. So if you take all these features out of the context, it may not convey the intended meaning. So it is always necessary to read these cues or interpret these cues in context. Apart from these linguistic features, meaning or interpretation is also relatable to some conversational practices. A speaker's intentional or unintentional use of these practices provides cues for interpretation to the listener and determines the nature, success, or failure of the interaction. Some such practices include turn taking, silence, indirectness, and politeness. Turn taking refers to a commonly followed conversational convention that one person should talk at a time. And silence plays an important role in communication as speech. A researcher in intercultural encounters has to first understand that silence has different implications in different cultures. It may not mean the same thing in all the cultures. It definitely mean different things according to various cultures. Indirectness as a conversational strategy may be used in the form of hints, irony, and metaphor. Politeness is concerned with affective aspects of communication as a means of expressing respect and friendliness. It can be expressed through facial expression, gesture, and body stance. For example, the Japanese avoid eye contact as a means of showing politeness. So this again may vary according to the culture. When all the participants notice the presence of contextualization cues and understand them correctly, communication takes place. If a listener fails to recognize the cues and their significance, he or she cannot react to them. The speaker's utterance and intent are misinterpreted. He or she is misunderstood as impolite or unfriendly, and the communication fails to achieve its goal. Actually, this kind of miscommunication is due to the listener's inability to grasp the contextualizing cues and their lack of communicative competence results in the failure of this communication. We'll now look at some barriers to intercultural communication. First, we have language difference. That is, although we may share a language, dialectal differences or use of slang or different perceptions of the same words can cause problems. Even interpreters may not be of help sometimes in this case. And then we have body language. So different culture groups use different body language. For example, South European cultures may use more eye contact than Americans or Britons. Or let's say Latin Americans may stand closer to their audience than may be comfortable for an Indian or even a North American. Next, we have level of context. Asian cultures tend to be high context cultures. That is, they depend on the context to a large extent to infer the meaning of what is said. As against this, cultures may be low context where the person means explicitly what she says. Similarly, we have stereotypes and prejudices. So here what happens is preconceived notions of what people from another culture are like can become impediments in communication. Or let's say ethnocentrism, that is believing in the superiority of one's culture over others. So this can also be a serious problem. If you think you are superior to the other, and in that case the superiority complex of yours may become a barrier to intercultural communication. Next we have value of time, that is deadlines and punctuality may mean different things to people from different culture. For example, Asians are said to value results and relationships over time commitments, which may not be the same in the other culture. So this again may cause a barrier. Next we have expression of emotions. While some cultures allow open display of emotions, personal likes and dislikes, curiosity about the other, excitement, etc., other cultures such as the American censor open display of personal feelings. So in such a culture, in such a place where open display of personal feelings are censored, if you go ahead and project your likes and dislikes or project your emotions, it may be considered as a very rude act. We'll now look at the methodology for analyzing intercultural communication. A researcher should start by adopting an empirical approach to the cultural issues. The empirical studies should follow certain things, and the primary thing that is to be followed or to be looked at is a selection of data. In selecting data for analysis, lengthy talks that reflect the norms, beliefs, and values of communities seen as disembodied, hypothetically uniform wholes can hardly be empirically viable. It will certainly be a better option if we select a speech event as a unit of verbal interaction and analyze it. The contents and structure of a speech event are socially and culturally constrained, and therefore the ethnographic information and norms its analysis renders are readily verifiable. Next is scanning the recorded material on two levels of organization. That is, you should be scanning it on content level and pronunciation and prosodic organization. So the two levels of organization on which the recorded material should be scanned are content and pronunciation and prosodic organization. Next we have transcription. It is customary to present the event or the piece of conversation in written form. Even the non-linguistic conversational features like overlap can be transcribed by making use of conventions of transcription. Transcripts are interactional texts that account for all communicatively significant verbal and non-verbal signs. So in transcription, you should be able to incorporate both verbal and non-verbal signs in communication. Now, after preparing the transcript, the analyst proceeds to consider all the perceptual cues, verbal and non-verbal, segmental and non-segmental, and paralinguistic. These cues play a crucial role in the process of communication. Since both the speaker and the listener depend on them for communication and interpretation of meaning, it really matters. The researcher can then proceed to explore the recurrence of the form, that is context relationship, and arrive at a general hypothesis regarding the speaker's contextualization practice and the culture reflected in them. So the primary thing is in the selection of data, the researcher should be selecting a valid data which should be scanned on two levels, that is content and pronunciation and prosodic organization, which again should be transcripted. And in transcription, what is important is that the researcher should transcript both verbal and non-verbal signs. Now this recorded and transcribed material should be analyzed on all perceptual cues, after which the researcher should be looking at the recurrence of the form, and it is only after this step the researcher can arrive at a general hypothesis regarding the speaker's contextualization practices and the culture that is reflected in their speech. We are now going to discuss two speech events to demonstrate the role of conversational practices in an intercultural discourse and how their non-observance can lead to misinterpretation. The illustrations are borrowed from Gumper's discourse strategies. So you can look into a text and you can see two conversations between an interviewer and an applicant. So the first one is an interview for the post of electrician, and the second one is an interview for the post of bricklayer. Now if you look at, so both the conversations are taken from a set of selection interviews recorded in the mid 1970s in the British Midlands. The applicants are applying for paid traineeships at a publicly funded institution offering instruction in skills that are in short supply. So as mentioned earlier, the first one is an interview for the post of an electrician, and the second one is an interview for the post of a bricklayer. So let's just look at the first conversation. So the interviewer asks, "Have you visited the skills center?" And the applicant says, "Yes, I did." And the interviewer asks again, "So you have had a look at the workshops?" Applicant says, "Yes." Interviewer, "You know what the training allowance is, do you?" Applicant, "Yeah." Interviewer, "Do you know how much you have got to live on for the period of time?" Moving on to the second conversation, you can easily notice that it is no more a one-word answer to the interviewer's question. The applicant is actually involving in the conversation, and he is not just restricting himself in talking. He or she, whoever that is talking. They are answering properly to the interviewer's question. So in both the speech, in both the speech events, the interviewer asks roughly the same questions to the two applicants. But the applicants differ in the way they answer the questions and consequently the treatment they receive. In case of the second applicant, that is the bricklayer, he elaborates his answers, which enables the interviewer to judge how he has interpreted the question. And let's say the two participants actively collaborate in constructing the exchange, and we have the impression that they understand each other. This is the case of bricklayer. So both the interviewer and the applicant, they participate actively in constructing the exchange, and we have the impression that they understand each other. So just by seeing the conversation, it's pretty much clear that they understand each other, and the applicant, the interviewer's message is correctly conveyed. On the other hand, in case of the conversation one, that is the conversation with the electrician and the interviewer, the applicant provides only minimal replies, volunteering no information on his own. So we have the impression that he is being rather passive, leaving the interviewer to do all the work. When the interviewer, let's just check out the conversation one. And towards the end of it, the interviewer asks, "You know what the training allowance is, do you?" For which the applicant says, yeah. And the interviewer is not very clear whether the applicant has understood the question or not. Which is why the interviewer is rephrasing the question, and the interviewer has asked it again in such a way that, "Do you know how much you have got to live on for the period of time?" Now, why do you think the interviewer has rephrased this question? It is precisely because the interviewer thinks the applicant did not get the question. It seems that the interviewer is not sure that the applicant understands what is it that the interviewer meant. The electrician, although he has been living in Britain for a number of years, he is a South Asian by background, and the bricklayer, a native of the local region. Now, we could argue, therefore, that ideology-based prejudice is at work. There is no question that ideology is an important factor, but experience with this and other similar workplace situations suggests that the treatment the two applicants receive is also due to the fact that based on their communicative and cultural backgrounds, interviewers and applicants draw different inferences from what they see and hear. And therefore, pragmatic analysis of such inferential processes can provide evidence to show how such differences come about and how they affect the workplace climate.
Summary. The discussion that preceded showed that the amalgamation of socio-culturally and linguistically different people has given rise to peculiar communication situations. Many times, it creates what is generally known as the problem of intercultural communication. We have been led into seeing that when people from different cultures have to interact with one another, what kind of problems they are faced with and what strategies they employ in overcoming the problems. You have been also given the opportunity to look at the practical analysis of the context involving intercultural interaction and pragmatic analysis of the communication in such situations. Hope you will spend time doing the exercises that are recommended for you to be able to understand the concepts and the methods of analyzing text from the point of view of intercultural pragmatics. Thank you.